who has gotten a lot of due process already and exhausted every single legal avenue to challenge their deportation.
I guess
I don't want, on that front,
let me just pause you there because I just don't want people to be confused. The administrative warrant is not a warrant that a judge sees. Typically in the United States, in order for authorities to break into your home without your permission, they need a judge to see it and to say you can enter because you're looking for something and you're authorized to enter. Right, because citizens have
constitutional rights.
But that man, for example, that we just played the video.
In today's video, Abby Phillip shuts down Batya Ungar-Sargon on NewsNight with Abby Phillip as a heated CNN clash erupts over ICE raids, constitutional rights, and government overreach. Abby Phillip puts Batya Ungar-Sargon on the spot over administrative warrants, due process, and whether immigration enforcement is crossing serious legal lines. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Batya Ungar-Sargon on NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
Tonight, an unprecedented escalation in Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. Federal immigration officers are asserting a sweeping power to forcibly enter people's homes without a warrant, contradicting ICE's own written guidance. In a memo obtained by the AP, the acting ICE director instructs officers to forcibly enter residences based solely on administrative warrants. These are typically never seen by a judge. So a whistleblower report has highlighted that this memo has not actually been widely shared within ICE, but its contents are being used to verbally train new officers. It's unclear how broadly the directive has been applied, but video from earlier this month shows officers bearing only administrative warrant and ramming the front door of a man. So this whistleblower complaint, I think, really explains some of what we've been seeing, Bakari. And it also suggests that there's some surreptitiousness happening even within ICE, where people are being told not to actually write them down, not to keep the directives, but to read it and then return it. What do you think is going on here?
I mean, I think ICE has run amok. I think that's what we're seeing. I think that the fact that they only trained 47 days, that should, one, outrage everybody. I mean, the fact is most barbers in the United States of America, most beauticians, all have to have more training than that. They're going out on the street. They're disregarding the law. They act as if they're above the law. You have the little short guy who runs ICE marching in the street looking like the head of the Gestapo. I mean, this is not what America is. And then I want to quote Kavanaugh, which is rare for me to quote, but he says the officers must not make interior immigration stops or arrests based on race or ethnicity. This was a footnote in one of the opinions that he wrote. And that's not, I mean, we literally are seeing ICE agents go out there and stop people because of what they look like.
To the point where they are stopping Native Americans. They're stopping African Americans. They're stopping U.S. citizens.
You saw the Twin Cities. And this is frustrating to me because even when I served in the General Assembly in South Carolina, you got to a point where Democrats and Republicans were able to look at each other and say, look, this is some bullshit. This is cool. Whatever. You know, we understand. There was a point in which we were South Carolinians or Americans first. Now you have limited government Republicans running around and they're okay with warrantless searches. How does that make sense? This is an abuse of power.
What jumps out in this whole clash is how moments like this always pop up when enforcement power grows faster than oversight. We've seen this movie before. After 9/11's aggressive federal tactics led to mass surveillance programs and detentions that courts later said crossed constitutional lines. The ACLU and multiple Inspector General reports over the years have shown that when agencies operate in legal gray zones, mistakes don't stay rare. They scale. That history matters because it shows civil liberties don't usually disappear in one dramatic moment. They erode through temporary shortcuts that quietly become standard operating procedure over time. There's also a real-world safety angle people gloss over. Major policing studies, including research tied to community policing models, show crime reporting drops in neighborhoods where residents fear contact with authorities. When people think any interaction could spiral into detention, they stop calling for help, stop being witnesses, and pull back from cooperation. that doesn't just affect undocumented immigrants, it affects entire communities. Public safety works best when there's trust. Once enforcement starts feeling unpredictable or overly aggressive, that trust collapses, and rebuilding it can take years, sometimes decades, in vulnerable neighborhoods. And legally, the home has always been treated as sacred ground in constitutional law. Supreme Court precedent consistently puts the highest Fourth Amendment protection on physical entry into someone's residence. Even in national security cases, courts have pushed back when executive power bypasses judicial review. When enforcement practices start testing those boundaries, it's not just about immigration. It's about the balance of power between agencies and the courts. If that balance tips too far toward unchecked discretion, the precedent doesn't stay contained. It reshapes how rights function for everyone long term.
The people who, on the right in particular, who are typically concerned about things like, the government overreach, searches and seizures, et cetera, does it give you pause that they are expanding the view of what they can do to break into people's homes?
Well, first of all, it's not without a warrant. It's an administrative warrant. And what the memo actually says is if a judge has issued a final order of removal, meaning that this is an illegal who has gotten a lot of due process already and exhausted every single legal avenue to challenge their deportation.
I guess
I don't want, on that front, I don't have
let me just pause you there because I just don't want people to be confused. The administrative warrant is not a warrant that a judge sees. Typically in the United States, in order for authorities to break into your home without your permission, they need a judge to see it and to say you can enter because you're looking for something and you're authorized to enter. Right, because citizens have constitutional rights. But that man, for example, that we just played the video of, he might have lived in that house, but that house also resided other American citizens. So again, where are the people on the right who are typically concerned about constitutional rights? Are you not at all worried
about constitutional rights for
that
American
they can just break into your home?
We have different standards of what due process is owed to an American citizen and what is owed to a non-citizen.
What about this
scenario?
And we
should all support that.
What about
this scenario? We should all want a higher level of due process and constitutional rights that are guaranteed to us as American citizens, not to illegals, because it's supposed to mean something to be an American.
Hold on.
But Batya
there are a lot of problems with that. I mean, there are constitutional rights that, just basic constitutional rights that don't change based on whether you're a citizen.
Yeah, but you're wrong, Batya, because
they have a right to due process, but that standard is much lower than what counts as due process.
You were wrong.
That's a different thing.
That is right.
No, the Fifth and 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution provide that everyone, even non-citizens, have a right to due process.
Yes, to due process, but the standard of due process for expelling an illegal is much lower than the standard that we would have if we were accused of a crime.
We are talking about entering one's domicile, one's abode.
They have a final order of deportation.
Batya, you cannot utilize military or law enforcement in the United States of America to enter one's home colloquially willy-nilly. You just simply cannot do that because of the fundamental guarantees we have under the United States Constitution.
Yes, that
and
we
what happens
have as American citizens.
One way or another.
What makes this clash hit harder is that the legal guardrails around the home are some of the strongest in U.S. law, and that's not accidental. Courts have called the home the core of Fourth Amendment protection for decades. Even during the War on Terror, judges pushed back when executive power stretched too far inside domestic spaces. When enforcement starts leaning on internal paperwork instead of judicial sign-off, it raises the same red flag civil liberties groups warned about in past surveillance and detention battles that later got scaled back. There's also a numbers reality people don't talk about. DHS watchdog reports over the years have documented repeated errors in databases used for immigration enforcement, mismatched identities, outdated records, and citizens wrongly flagged. When you combine high-pressure operations with imperfect data, the risk of hitting the wrong door isn't hypothetical, and history shows once communities believe enforcement is blunt and unpredictable, cooperation with all law enforcement drops. Police chiefs in multiple cities have said fear of immigration consequences makes witnesses less likely to come forward, which undercuts public safety overall. Then there's the constitutional piece that goes beyond immigration politics. Supreme Court rulings like Payton v. New York draw a bright line around physical entry into a residence without a judicial warrant. That principle wasn't built around citizenship status. It was built around limiting state power at the threshold of the home. If exceptions quietly expand through enforcement practice rather than legislation or court rulings, the precedent doesn't stay boxed into one issue area. It shifts the balance between individual rights and government authority in ways that stick long after the political moment passes.
There's no question that this is going to be challenged because prior to this moment, this actually has not been the DHS's policy because they don't, that previously to this new determination, for whatever reason, they believed that it would have been unconstitutional to enter a home forcibly without a warrant.
Yeah, and we will see what the court rules. I'm a big fan of warrants, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't go. What's the difference between an administrative and a regular warrant? I don't know, so I don't want to speak out of school here. But the courts will rule, and similar to how you saw Trump act in the last Supreme Court ruling in pulling National Guard out, not very dictator-like, I'll be honest. We hear he's a dictator, and then he listens to the courts. I don't think Hitler did that much, but. Look, I like warrants as usual, but my concern mostly is why people with deportation orders dating back to 1996, rape, multiple counts of homicide, et cetera, were allowed to re-enter the streets in Minnesota, didn't do anything about it, and why they don't listen to Tom Homan and let them get them in the jails so we don't have to go to.
Nobody is arguing against gathering the worst of the worst, the rapists.
Right, but then why?
If he was actually doing that. Why? If he was actually doing that, I think everybody would be applauding him.
They won't let them in the jails. Of course, people
Can I finish my thought for a minute? I think Barack.
Jesus, Donald Trump.
Ari is completely right that they have run amok. Right now, as we sit here, it was just found that a Cuban immigrant who was being held in an El Paso jail, the medical examiner has found that he was killed in ICE custody, in a detention center. There have been more deaths since Trump took office, over 30 deaths in ICE custody. And I think we as Americans should be setting an example to the world of how we treat people, even when they are detained. And there is such performative, emboldened cruelty that is happening because this administration is encouraging it.
Right. And that if everyone supports it, why won't they let them?
Nobody supports that. Nobody supports that. Look at his numbers. Look at his approval numbers on immigration.
Why won't they let them in the jail?
What makes Ana Navarro's side feel grounded here is that the Constitution doesn't bend just because the politics get heated. The Supreme Court has repeatedly treated the home as the most protected space under the Fourth Amendment, even in cases involving serious crimes. Forced entry without a judicial warrant is one of the highest legal bars the government has to clear. That standard exists specifically for tense moments, when fear or anger could tempt officials to move first and justify later. History shows when those guardrails weaken, it rarely stays limited to one group. There's also the accountability angle people overlook. Government watchdogs and Inspector General reports have flagged problems inside immigration detention for years. Medical neglect findings, oversight gaps, and inconsistent standards between facilities. When detention systems expand quickly, safeguards often lag behind. That's not theory. It's been documented across multiple administrations. If conditions deteriorate or custody deaths rise, it becomes not just an immigration issue, but a human rights and liability issue for the government. Countries are often judged globally, not by how they treat model citizens, but by how they treat people with the least power. And from a public safety standpoint, constitutional process and enforcement goals aren't opposites. Law enforcement research shows targeted operations built on solid warrants and clear evidence are more effective long-term than broad, high-visibility sweeps. Precision builds stronger cases and holds up in court. Shortcuts create legal challenges that can collapse prosecutions entirely. So the debate isn't really safety versus rights. Durable safety usually depends on rights being respected, because when enforcement loses legitimacy, courts, communities, and juries all become less cooperative with the system. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.